Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. We're going to delve into the whole domain today of divination and oracles and how we humans can use abstract objects and mechanisms to discern answers to questions and insight into puzzles that perplex us. You know, it's an extraordinary thing about how we interact with the larger universe and how we, with our own microscopic intelligence and consciousness, how we align with the larger intelligence, the larger consciousness that undergirds and manifests itself through everything that is. And today we're going to go into one of the most ancient divinatory mechanisms and instruments known to humanity, the I Ching. I became familiar with the I Ching when I was at Cambridge University, actually doing my PhD in philosophical theology. And a friend of mine came into the little meditation center at Marion Close that I was presiding over. That's how I got through my university years. I was a caretaker of a little meditation center that was owned and operated by the Epiphany philosophers, a group of Cambridge dons. And my job was to just keep it tidy and welcome all the different groups that came in to use the center, from Quakers to transcendental meditators to Bhagwan dynamic meditators to all Tibetan Buddhists to all kinds of people. And I served tea and cookies and then cleaned up after they left. And a friend of mine came in, and I was perplexed by a certain issue. I even forget what it was now. And I was starting to talk to him about it and get his advice. And he said, you know, Jim, if you want real advice, you need to consult with the I Ching. And I'd heard of the I Ching. I'd read about it, but I'd never used it. You know, in my late 20s, I was typical alpha male and master of the universe and completely rational. And I just come from Harvard, and I was very academically oriented, and I challenged him a bit, and he said, just try it. Suspend your judgment and just throw these coins. So he brought the I Ching out, and I suspended my skepticism, and I threw the coins 6 times. And he interpreted. He didn't touch the coins, but he looked at them after I'd thrown them. And then he picked out the hexagram that was designated, and I read what it said. And I was absolutely astonished at the insight that it gave me about the question that I was pondering. And that began for me what is now nearly 50 years of devotion to the I Ching. I've met many people. I've asked many questions, and most people that you interact with, you commune with them and they give you your opinions, their opinions, and you contemplate it. But I've never personally consulted with an oracle more consistently reliable than the I Ching. And it could be that I was born in China and imbibed that civilization and culture from my infancy till I was a teenager. but the reality of the I Ching opens up for us, as does the Tarot, as does the Enneagram, as do all sorts of divinatory practices and instruments, a deep mystery of how humans, caught up as we all are in all of our problems, born mostly out of our delusions of separation from the whole and our overly rationalized separation from our own hearts, careening around the planet, doing unbelievable damage to the earth and each other on a consistent basis. And in our confusion, occasionally we fall to our knees and ask for help, to simply understand what's happening at a larger level. And even though we're completely inseparable from everything that is, our entire civilizations and ways of being in the world are predicated on the illusion that we're separate. And then all of a sudden we have an experience with a deck of cards, with coins, even the flight of birds that become portals to the reality that it is all one. And that if we open ourselves to the one and allow these divination tools to become instruments, portals of oneness, we receive wisdom beyond our finitude. And that is what divination most essentially is. And the I Ching is one of the most ancient. And in ancient China, I mean, a Chinese civilization is the oldest continuous civilization known to humanity many times over. The history of the United States is about 250 years. The history of China is over 5,000 years. And 5,000 years at the beginning of Chinese civilization, the I Ching was already considered ancient. No one even knows its origin. And so we're going to spend the next hour or so with someone who's deeply studied the I Ching and someone who has revised the I Ching, which is not an insignificant accomplishment. You've seen her before on Humanity Rising, Spring Ching. She's part of Stephanie Mind's regenerative health faculty that is developing a master's and PhD degree in regenerative health. She was born in China, in pre-industrial China, and lived her life there, and then came to the United States, which is post-industrial. And in many ways, she has balanced both worlds. She has a master's in statistics and a PhD in molecular biology. She worked in the pharmaceutical industry for many years, but that didn't satisfy her soul. It didn't satisfy the yearning of her heart. And so she's broadened her own education and really delve back into Chinese medicine and Chinese oracular traditions, including the I Ching. Now works as a coach and a teacher, both here in the United States, but also in China, and has developed what she calls the Resonance Code, which is a revitalization of the I Ching, bringing a more feminine interpretive framework to an oracle that was framed, as most things were back in ancient times, within a patriarchal system. So Spring, I really want to welcome you with deep heart today on one of my favorite subjects. Spring is going to give us our opening attunement. And then she and I will dialogue for the balance of the time and draw in any questions or comments any of you want to make. But I just want to welcome our global community of Humanity Rising and welcome you to the mysteries of ancient China. So Spring, give us an opening attunement.
Thank you so much, Jim, for this lovely, lovely introduction. It's always great to come back on Humanity Rising. It feels like return to home now. I've been coming here quite often the last months with the Stephanie's Regenerative Health Master Program. So, so I would like to lead mostly for myself, but for those of you who would like to follow me, I would like to lead a Qigong exercise that was very dear to my heart. And in the Chinese tradition, Qigong is a somatic spiritual practice. So basically, we're enfolding the meaning, the sense-making process into a gentle and energetic movement. So in this particular movement that I would like to share with you, it encoded a deep meaning that's actually also very pertinent to our topic I Ching today. Basically, human body as a channel between the earth and the sky. Sky means the cosmos, the greater universe. So when the time that the I Ching was developed, I Ching basically is the book of change. I means change and Ching means scripture. So this is a practice that to remind our body, not just our mind, but our heart and our cells, that we are channels that help the energy from the earth to go to sky, and help the channel the energy from the sky back down to the earth. So I'm gonna stand up, and you can adapt to what I do sitting down if you wish, or you can stand up with me. So I call this exercise tree and waterfall. So I would like to invite you to stand just comfortably and invite you to bring your awareness to your feet on the ground and evoke our imagination as if the body is like a tree trunk. And as we bring our awareness to the foot, we in our imagination, our attention start to go down into the earth, just like a tree is extending its roots all the way as far as it can into the earth. And as we know now that in a forest, the trees actually connect with each other. The entire forest is connecting into an organism with the root interconnecting with each other. So as we bring our awareness down, we are connecting with our ancestries, connecting with all that provided by the earth that has made this embodiment possible as a biological being, living, breathing on the earth. And through that connection, through that biological connection, through our very presence, the very fact that we're breathing and living, we're actually connected in a very enlivened way with all that's living. And now let's bring our attention to our tailbone and ask it to drop gently towards the earth. And then we're going to gently tap the top of the crown, which is an acupuncture point, which actually opens the energy up to subtler dimensions of our being. So we gently tap these points and just becoming aware of the downward pulling, and also as if there's a gentle upward pulling from the top of our crown. And with that, we're evoking our imagination like the tree extending its branches on top of us. Now let's take a few deep breaths. Now with a inhale and exhale, I'm going to drop my weight and pointing my fingers to the ground and straighten out on my spine while raising my hands all the way like trees, raising the branches to the sky. And from as far as our imagination can go, we're going to source an energy downward and bring it into our body. Imagining it's like a rain, a waterfall, rinsing and healing and nourishing our internal organs. And we're going to help this energy to flow down through the legs, through the feet, and all the way back into the earth where it starts. And we're going to come back to this neutral position and enjoy a few breaths. And let's do it together one more time. Inhale and exhale and drop down our weight and use our awareness to reach the root. And from there, we're feeling the growth energy, raising our hands up, the growth coming from the Mother Earth, pushing our branches all the way as far as we can imagine. And then we're feeling a very subtle, fresh, tantalizing energy that's raining down into our body. And flow through the legs into the ground and nourish the roots. And we come back to the neutral position. And I'm going to invite us to do one more time. And this time I'm going to do it in silence. And I invite you to tune in to your own rhythm. We're going to finish by bring our hands together in front of our heart. And I'd like to invite you to open your eyes and open our senses, feeling our torso, our body is like a tree, connecting between the earth and sky. Thank you.
Thank you, Spring.
Thank you, Jim.
So, Spring, let's begin with you telling your story of how you were introduced to the I Ching.
Yeah.
Then we can unfold the conversation from there.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So my story with I Ching actually is, I would say, from the very beginning, carry the wounding. There's a story of wounding and trauma in it, because I was born during the 70s. It was in the middle of the Cultural Revolution. So as far as I can remember, at the earliest of my memory, anything ancient, anything of my own culture, because it was a time where the entire culture it's called the Cultural Revolution, where revolutionized the ancient teaching to make space for what came after, which is not, in the last 40 years, there's this giant wave of economic development, a lot of taking in the Western values. But in order for that to happen, it's like the entire culture is cleaning out it's almost like a severance with our ancient lineage. So when I was growing up, I heard about the book of I Ching, but it's labeled as a toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the part of the wounding. It's something that's so deeply ingrained in our own ancestry. We out of all the historical, under the influence of all the historical context and our own, I guess, developmental trajectory, we are denying our own very origin. So, however, even though that was the information that I was being told that it's toxic and shouldn't look at it, that's superstitious, it's bad, it's unscientific. And here's the thing, I grew up in a time when people take science becomes this religion, that we use science to measure everything, including our own heritage. So it becomes non-scientific, then it's basically a taboo subject. So that's my beginning. However, I want to say that when the first time I encountered the Tai Chi symbol, the yin and the yang, the double fish, I felt a mystical drawn to this symbol. I knew instantly that something in me is it's something crucially important. My body felt it, but my mind couldn't grasp what that means, because we were all the way learning science and math in the school, and very little traditional education. So, long story short, so I came to the West after college and got a degree in PhD, molecular biology, and along the way I studied the statistics, and that's kind of my job in pharmaceutical industry, is statistical analysis of big data. And out of all kinds of circumstance, I became very much aware of the collective trauma that I have experienced through the modernization, the taking on the capitalistic, the overly intellectualization value. So I at that moment I decided to switch to learn Chinese medicine and reunite with my Taoist root. And interestingly, it was at that moment I suddenly put this together, that both my mother's dad and my father's dad were actually Chinese medicine practitioners. I never even thought about it before, like to put them together. It wasn't until I was in Chinese medicine school, I was like, wait a minute, this is in my family, and I wasn't even thinking about it all those years, because it was just the whole Chinese culture in the last 40 years is forward, catching up with the rest of the world out of great fear. And people did not look back. And I was among, I'd say, the first wave of people who wanted to look back and return to the origin. So that's how I encountered. So in that process, actually, at that time I was in a relationship with my first lover in the West, from the West, Italian man. So he is, so this is the ironic, it's my Italian lover who introduced I Ching to me. Yeah. So, and ever since then, I Ching has become this, that was like about 15 years ago. So in the last 15 years, it has been the theme of my life, is how to revitalize. I like your word, revitalize this ancient language through my life journey.
Yeah, you know, these ancient traditions and ancient texts, they get encrusted
Yes.
over time.
Yes.
And it's like a religion, you know, that
Yes.
gets reduced to ritual and ceremony and repetitive chanting and so forth. So it loses the meaning.
Yeah.
And yet the profundity of the origin
Yeah.
it is so strong.
Yeah.
And actually radiate through the incrustations that
Totally.
communities put on it generation after generation. And if you just to return to the Cultural Revolution, you know, part of what I think China needed to go through was kind of a ripping away
Right.
the Chinese soul of all the incrustations of the past.
Right.
That it reduced it to servitude in the face of the Western imperial technical superiority.
Yeah.
And you know, and to rise again. And now China is a behemoth on the world stage. And it's interesting that even Xi Jinping now is talking about China as an ecological civilization, and is starting to talk about how now that China has been liberated from its past, how it can reconnect with the past, but within a completely new context of kind of a new world. And you, in some ways, have embodied that transition.
I was being swept away by this current. Yeah.
And then you meet this Italian guy. Yeah.
I bring that in because my work, Resonance Code, I call it a marriage between East and West, because it came out of, so my partner now, the Italian guy is Langang. My partner now, Joe, he's the co-founder of Resonance Path and co-author of Resonance Code. So what you talk about, at the primordial origin of these texts is fresh, lived, our actual experience of life.
Yeah.
So the Resonance Code, the I Ching, the reinvention of I Ching process, coupled with my coupling with Joe, my partner, and we together shared understanding and shared experience of how East and West can communicate and interface and co-create together. So and that lived experience is my way of going back to the origin, to be intimate with life's in what life's bring, including the pain and the joy, the ecstasy, the separation and the union, all of that.
Well, let's dive in here, and let me start with a comment that Amy Blumenschein is just making, because I think that opens up this the mystery of the I Ching. She's saying that she wants to testify to the experience of the sacred shower that she's experienced a couple of times in sacred sites. One was the center of the labyrinth during the Chartres Academy course that, as you all know, Ubiquity University convenes a pilgrimage every year to Chartres, which is another place of extraordinary divinatory and mystical power. In this case, in Chartres, associated with the sacred feminine, which she learned was to tune into the energy lines of the planet while doing yoga during a pre-Chartres Academy course in the Dordogne. And she's been greatly blessed by these courses. But it opens up, Spring, what I would love to explore with you, and that is, how do you understand through your own experience the power of divination. And as I was saying in my opening, this extraordinary phenomenon that you can throw coins and have a book that's been around for 5,000, 6,000 years old that didn't know anything about you when it was written, but yet in the moment, it can speak to you through the throwing of coins, or like Amy, through walking the labyrinth. In the Chartres Cathedral in France. She comes from Minnesota. How does that happen? How do you understand the mystery of divination, or what they call augury? How do you understand what's happening?
Yeah, thank you for that great question. First of all, I would say, the book probably know you, Jim.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah,
I didn't know it, but it knew me.
Yeah, the book, so it's not like the book the book, I think, came out of the womb of Mother Earth. And, just like our body has billions, tens and billions of cells, and they all in a way know each other. Otherwise, they won't be able to co-inhabit as a body. So Jim, the cells, the cells in your body, the materiality of your body come from the earth. So we have this idea of identity. We have our degrees, titles, and the website, and the name card, and those things. We attach our, we think that's us, but on a larger level, our presence deeply resonate with the entire organism of the earth. So in a way, something coming out from that source, it is our, like you said, the portal into the connected nature of our being. And so another way to understand it. So I have like different angles to this question. So another angle to understand is how our Earth is enshrouded in this electromagnetic field, the North and the South Pole. And when we are, say, navigating in the woods, we took out our compass, and the compass will show us the north, because the compass automatically align with the needle, the magnetic needle align with the north, the magnetic lines. And the way that magnetic needle, the reason it can align is because it's floating on a very small friction. So if this is the needle, it's the friction is very, it's almost practically floating in a liquid kind of state. So it's very, very light, a very, very light needle that can pointing to us where the magnetic line is. So in a way, the divination, when we throw up the coin, at that moment, our awareness is suspended from our daily life's responsibility, our attachment, our identity, what we like or we don't like. We suspended ourselves. It's like we suspended that magnetic needle, untethered from all the bondage, and it becomes floating again. And in that moment of suspension, we become aligned with the larger organism. That's actually, it's like a womb that always accompanying our living process. Yeah. So that's how I understand intellectually why we throw a coin, and that coin will show us exactly where we are and where we need to go.
Yeah, I've done it with people who have never heard of the I Ching and actually don't believe it's real, and yet it still works.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Well, here's actually one thing. Earlier someone, when I first encountered I Ching, my mind was completely bounded by the conventional education system. What I think was rational thought, and of course, especially because as a statistician, the throwing coin is something we counted as random noise. It's the least valuable thing, right? So I have to, so, but however, this, when it worked so many times, when I see that, well, yeah, wait, there's something going on here. It actually invoked the science part of me. Science to me is not about just, I think a lot of times we take science as a religion now. We actually lose touch of the true spirit of science, which is the true spirit of science for me is curiosity and investigation, and not bound by what you already know, but it's this process of, oh, something that's not consistent with what I know happened, and it happened consistently. How do I expand my knowledge to include this unknown that's challenging what I know? And this is actually something very sad for me, because I see a lot of scientists lost touch with that spirit and become bound by the knowledge, the static knowledge we gathered. And I think this is what the resonance code is actually designed for, is we need to, and this is very consistent with Ubiquity's philosophy, that science is not just a third person seeing the world as an object and studying that object. We need to bend the scientific investigation to our internal process and see ourselves as the first person experience, as the scientific material as well.
Yeah. Well, and just to think about this notion of the compass more deeply in light of what is also known in the science, is that our consciousness and our intention can shape random
Right.
numbers and random events, so that consciousness and the empirical world are inseparably interconnected. So, for example, I have right here, and I use it regularly, this is a crystal. You can use it to put something on your body. You just keep your hand very still and it'll start to swing, because even though our conscious mind doesn't know the answer, our unconscious actually does.
Yes.
And so whether it's a dowsing or a crystal or the I Ching or the Tarot, when you go into that quiet place where there's just a minimum amount of friction,
right?
When you're throwing the coins with your hand, you're actually imbuing into the coins a certain energetic quality.
Yes.
That combined with the attunement of the oracle itself can provide a message that is deeply profound, that if you contemplate, will bring to your conscious mind that which has been unconscious the whole time. I mean, how would you comment on that understanding in relationship to the I Ching and divination sort of generally?
I love your description. I think it's almost like our current scientific view of the world is actually built out of a very I'd say young, like useful. There's a lot of, it's a young and stage of our scientific understanding. And what you talk about, the quantum physics, it becomes we're entering into a more mature realm. And in fact, I in the past, I've encountered these two physicists who wrote a book, said we had something called "We Had No Idea." So basically, all the scientific knowledge that we knew about the universe comes to less than 5% of what actually is happening. So
Totally.
So
Totally.
I think for me, eventually when I first encountered I Ching, like many people, there's this sense of disbelief and ridiculous, like, that's because we're caught up in the arrogance of thinking we know.
The arrogance of the Western mind.
Yeah, the arrogance of this overly intellectual mind, which actually is become irrational, but it just didn't know it. It's no longer rational because it automatically rejects things that it cannot digest.
Yeah.
It's actually deviated from the spirit of rationality. So with that in mind, our conscious agency compared to the vastness of unconscious, I'd say is at most 5%. So I think
you're an optimist.
Yeah, I don't want to shock us too much. Yeah, right. So I think this is a basic, the I Ching is really teaching us to cultivate a deep sense of humility, humbleness. Like at any given time, we don't know how we get here. We don't know how we succeed. And likewise, even, I think the flip side is that I think arrogance has two sides of it. One is taking too seriously of our success and glory. And on the other side is also taking too seriously of our guilt or error or mistake. So the ego work both ways. So to the degree we are bound by our arrogance is also reflected to the degree we're bound by our guilt. We think, I made a mistake, or I did this, or I achieved that. But in fact, there's something much bigger going on. So that's something I got again through divination. Like when I wallowed in my own pain or guilt, or when I get too cocky, the divination again then brought me back to look at like what else is happening, what else factors are influencing how I got here.
Yeah, and I think just to cap this part of the discussion, then I want to move more explicitly into the I Ching. I think what you're saying is so insightful, Spring, because starting from the Socratic disposition that we not only do we not know, we don't even know what we think we know. Because we have no sense of the context in which what we know fits in to the larger whole.
Right.
And so in our unknowingness, we create strictures on what we think is real. Yeah. And that's why the Tao Te Ching starts with the great insight that the way that can be spoken is not the true way. Whatever you think is going on, ladies and gentlemen, isn't happening. And if you think it's true and you put the strictures on it, and then you create coercive mechanisms to get everybody to agree and so forth and so on. That's the origin of violence, according to the Tao Te Ching, is thinking that what is known is actually true. And not opening oneself up to the great mystery of the unknown that can flow through you, because ultimately it's all a mystery. And living, as I think many of us are seeking to do, gives us insight into the power of non-rational mechanisms of discerning the deeper truth.
Yeah, totally. And I think ultimately that actually will help our rational mind to mature, to develop beyond this adolescent craziness. So and I think that I want to give put words to these non-rational mechanism. So in our work, in resonance path work, we put a lot of emphasis on developing our feeling capacity, our intuitive capacity, and there's a lot of somatic work, and also using artistic expression as a way to attune this, seeing our body, our voice, our presence as almost like a tuning fork. How do we express ourselves in the present moment?
Yeah.
Part.
Well, it's back to this crystal. This is using yourself,
yes,
as a tuning fork.
Yes. Yeah.
And understanding that the micro is connected with the macro, and we are tuning forks, is a way into the mystery, because the questions then become much more important than the answers.
Yes. Yes. Right.
So I want to turn, Spring, to the I Ching itself, and I want to start with your understanding of the origins of the I Ching and so forth, and then how you came to realize that it needed revitalization, because that's a bold statement for anyone to make about a very ancient text, because what we tend to think, like, say, the Christians and Jews about the Bible. You know, we think it's literally the word of God, and you know, the Jewish tradition is that even every letter in Torah is exact and cannot be changed. And it's the exactitude of the totality that actually defines the inspiration and the illumination. And here you come 5,000 years later saying, wait a minute, I think it can be improved. So I just want to honor the audacity of your intelligence. But let's start at the beginning. There's many legends, but how would you tell the story of the origin of the I Ching?
Well, you know, this is the story that I don't know the origin I Ching. It's a mystery, but I have my own attunement, right? So, so the I Ching actually has two components. One is the text. You know, you throw the coin and you read for the English speaker, you read the translation of the origin of the text. And there's another component, which are the hexagrams, the lines of the yin and the yang, you know, the straight line as yang and the broken line as yin. So in a way, it's a binary code. It's the same structure that gave birth to our computer technology. In fact, the inventor of the mathematician, I forgot his name right now, who invented the binary code, he actually, one of the source is I Ching. It's 16th century. I think it's a German or Lebanese, a mathematician, a German or French mathematician.
Wow.
Yeah, at that time, he got a hold of he somehow got a hold of this hexagram, and it's one of his inspiration for inventing binary system. So in a way, so this is my imagination or my mythology, is that in a way the ancient Chinese, they probably received, possibly, and this is the kind of legend that in my attunement, I felt into, possibly even from civilization outside of Earth, that received this binary code that actually decode the deep mystery of universe as a computing mechanism that way beyond, you know, I know that in a lot of like a mystery oriented people, the minute when I say computer and a binary code, there's a kind of, oh no, that's not mystery, and that's not life. And I would say for Chinese, it's actually everything is life process. Everything is life process. The fact that we invented this massive computing technology, which is actually brought so much destruction and pain in the earth, but that if we don't have it in us, we won't be able to externalize it outside. So, but there's a way we can actually utilize those technologies to affirm life, to generate life instead of destroy it. It's just we haven't understood it yet. So for me, that's kind of the story of how I think the origin of I Ching. It's a cosmic grace that has been somehow granted to Earth, landed in where China is right now. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you're raising that. It's sort of a grace that came to ancient China.
Yeah.
Through probably some mystics over time that just began to commune with some of the cosmic energies.
Yes.
And probably one day one of them thought, had some insight that came through around, binary code and yin and yang. And if you put them together, and it's 64 hexagrams, and it's all perfection. And it's worth noting that in ancient Babylonia, ancient Egypt, the 60, the number 60 and 64 in China were the way we do 1 through 10 as the basic.
Yeah.
But in the ancient world, it was 60 and 64. That was the way you calculated both numbers, astronomy, astrology, and obviously in this case, divination. So I just want to bring that also up, that this 1 through 10 is actually a relatively recent phenomenon in human understanding, that the ancients were much more complex in the way they discerned the intricacies of reality.
Right. Yeah.
So the 64, a binary in 64 hexagrams with 6 possibilities per hexagram in different combinations.
Right.
The 64 are all the possible combinations of how the 6 hexagrams can come together. So like Torah, it's a total system. It's a cosmos in and of itself.
It's a cosmos in itself, right? So one other parallel I want to bring up, because I had a major in molecular biology, right? And it was, again, many years later, at the molecular level, all the complexity of life on Earth, mostly, are encoded into 64 genetic code. And there are actually a lot of study. Many people are trying to crack the parallel of the 64 genetic code and the 64 hexagrams.
I didn't know that. Say more. Say more.
So, well, so on the molecular level, like our genome, as human, our genome share, this is a well-known factor, 98% of our genetic information at the molecular level are identical with chimpanzee, and 85% are identical with a mouse. I mean, talking about interconnectivity. So basically, we see the tree is different than me. The rabbit eating the grass on the lawn is different than me. The bacteria, is different than me. But that's just on the outer shape, on the superficial level. But when we go drill down into on the molecular level, we're so that's part of the reason the virus is so powerful, right? Because it works at the genetic level. It changes our DNA. It can infiltrate into our DNA and bring information there that we may or may not like. Right. So and the genetic code are arranged with there's an architecture. So there are 4 different genetic code at 3 positions. So 4 to the times of power of 3, 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So there's these 64 codons. And and similarly, when I eventually, after this, I didn't copy that architecture, but when I finished the work of resonance code, I look back, I realized the resonance code is also exactly the same architecture. There are 4 energetic beings of so if we see ourselves, our nervous system as a tuning fork, there are 4 states. And there are 3 ways that these 4 states can permutate, which give rise to 64 modes of our being, modes of our presence. And that's how we communicate with the larger universe.
Fascinating, fascinating. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. That is extraordinary. The resonance between the I Ching and our own genetic architecture.
Genetic architecture and the binary code. So I want to say that, what this means to me is that, as someone, I grew up, like your introduction, I witnessed the shift from pre-industrial China to the, economic development and the massive destruction of nature. I would say of my young, as a young Chinese people, never a day I wasn't feeling the just massive pain that nature is enduring through this growth. So I was never really proud or kind of bought into the, we're all these economic, this GDP growth and all that things, that there's such a greed, because I for a variety of reasons, my system has always been open to nature, and I can feel the pain. However, after I revitalized the I Ching and start to see through my work, start to feel into this resonance between this ancient technology and now what the science and technology know about deeper reality of our present, life, like a genetic code and computer technology, it helps me to metabolize this pain, metabolize this grief, and to see that perhaps our technological development is not completely a failure and a mistake. There's something that, at least through my process, I salvaged some value into revitalizing this ancient. And that's, I think, part of the reason you asked me why I had the bold and audacity, I would say even ignorance in my part, to want to revitalize I Ching. And that's I wouldn't say that's the reason. The reason is a whole different mystical, how I got here is a whole, I was led by many dreams and guides and signs. But where I am right now, when I look back, I would say, oh, there is a deep wisdom. Through the marriage with technology, we can actually have a new way to process the pain of coming from the destruction of the technology.
Well, that's what I want to dive into now. How did you, Dr. Cheng, come about thinking that a revision of the I Ching was in order and that you were the one that was supposed to do it? So I want to hear about your dreams. Let's tell about your pathway, because you're revitalizing a very ancient book, and as they say, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And this angel went right in. So tell us about it. Tell us how that came upon you.
Let me give some. I saw some comments. I will tell by my dream, but let me first describe some context. So in the one ancient way of interpreting I Ching is to so in the old China, in Chinese culture, we see in Western civilization or in modern civilization is very much built on individual as a unit. But in China, we see the entire country as a unit. So, the ancient Chinese, especially under the influence of Confucius, with the family structure is a very important way to understand the universe. So we say, the yang is, so it's all metaphoric. So, in I Ching interpretation, there's a lot of, we call certain hexagram, trigrams as mother and the other father and the son and the daughter. And there's like 3 different sons, 3 different daughters. So in a way, let me come back to the origin. I talk about how my Italian lover brought me the book, right? So So because of the influence of the Chinese culture, from the very beginning, I intuited this is a metaphor, this is a sign. My relationship with this Italian lover is actually a metaphor of the Eastern and the Western part of, so I felt this, the self-identity formed and trained through the Western thoughts, and also my Eastern identity, coming from my heritage. And these two are not in relationship with each other until I Ching, the book of I Ching, showed up. So I entered that, that relationship become almost like a projection of how my internal, my internal relationship of the East and the West is being projected out into my relationship with this Italian lover. So, and this is interesting, the reason I call him the Italian lover is because we were both married at that time. And the reason, when I throw the hexagram, and so this is of course a relationship is very problematic. When I throw the hexagram, one of the hexagram coming out of the hex, if people who know I Ching know the hexagram, I think it's 50. Anyway, it's called Marrying Maiden. It's 53 or 50, no, not 50, 50, anywhere around 51, 2, 3, 4. I forgot which one. And it's talking about how a woman is being in relationship with an older man who has already have a wife. So that hexagram showed up again and again for me.
Wow.
And yeah. So when you talking about I mean, this is the story with I Ching with many people. It's, you come to it, it's like the book knows exactly where you are, right? So that's what I'm talking about. I realized, so from that moment, I realized, okay, the book is trying to tell me to learn something from this relationship. It's a very painful relationship. And I think it's through that hexagram, I realized and also my relationship with this man is because my feminine power, my feminine creativity is tremendously compromised. And also this hexagram talking about a woman who, in the traditional Chinese culture, of course, is deeply patriarchal, and a young woman can be seen as a commodity or object that fulfill the elder man who has a status and authority to fulfill his need. And I became basically enacting out exactly that script. So that becomes my leading question, so I'm talking about being a scientist on myself. So how do I find out the true essence of that hexagram? So that woman who's being compromised and being seen as an object or commodity to fulfill this man's need, what's her true essence? That's not even, the book didn't provide me a lot of answer in that because the book is written for a patriarch time, and it just advised that
it's
women.
The marrying maiden in relation to the older man, and it's from the older man's point of view.
Yes, exactly. It's from that integrity of that household, what this woman should do. I mean, at that time, it makes perfect sense, right? Right now we see it, you can judge that, you can critical that, but everything is contextual. At that time, there's a reason why that happens. So, but that showed me that the text as it is does not have all the answers I need. And this is something I need to find out for myself. What is the true meaning of that feminine creativity? And what, if it's not marrying maiden, then what? Right. And also because these 64 hexagram are, like you said, it's a whole universe. So when that hexagram is repetitively showing up and asking me to revitalize and revise and regenerate it, it actually influenced all other hexagrams too. So then, 10 years later, the resonance code. But so but I want to share a little bit of my dream. This dream that came, that was very extremely important in how to send me on this journey. So, I shared earlier in my reflection with you that all through the past decades, witnessing the shift from agriculture civilization, traditional family value, to all that is being torn apart and enter into this neck-breaking, like fast development of industrialization. I gathered so much that, like, I felt so much pain in me that I didn't know how to metabolize. And this pain all showed up in this relationship with this Italian lover. You can imagine it's very problematic. With both of us have family, and I mean, this relationship is out in the open. We are, there's a lot of grace in that relationship too, but there's a lot of trauma. So one day I had this dream that it was in a very difficult moment of that relationship moment that I was standing on a shore of an ocean. So ocean in the dreamland is very much pointing to the non-rational, the unconscious, unarticulated aspect of our self, implicit realm. And it was like a stormy night. The ocean is churning and the waves are like stored, several dozens feet of high wave. And suddenly the ocean parted, kind of like, biblical story. The ocean parted and shows me this deep abyss. And under the ocean, there's a whale, a dying whale. And, wow. And yeah, and I know that my heart is pounding. The energy is so huge. This dying whale, and her flesh is falling off the skeleton. She's almost a corpse, but her eyes is looking into my eyes. I can feel the tears turning up now. It's her eyes are looking to I said, I'm dying, and you're my child. So, and she said, you're my child, and you, basically she said, you are the ones I give my life to. And I, of course, was very fearful. The ego part of me is pulling away, like that. No, I can't do that. This is painful. This dying whale wants me to go into her body. And that moment, there's a cliff by the ocean shore, and on that cliff there is a Tibetan nun. And this is actually the reason there's a Tibetan nun is because before my mystical journey started, I actually was initiated at a sacred site in Tibet under a sacred mountain. There's actually a sacred mountain, which is husband and wife. There are two mountains, and they're being viewed as god and goddess. And I received an energetic transmission under the goddess mountain. And at the foot of that mountain, in that village, there's a nunnery. And I met several nuns there. And had a moment of communing with them. So on that cliff stands a nun, and she, despite my dropping back and say, no, I can't do this, she jumped into the corpse of the whale, and with that, I realized I had no choice but to jump in.
That's amazing. So you jumped in and feminized the I Ching. You brought the latent feminine, starting with the marrying maiden, and then you worked hexagram by hexagram, all the 64 hexagrams, and brought the feminine into more explicit definition, I would say, or illumination. That is an extraordinary work, Spring. That's really extraordinary. Tell us more about that process. I mean, how? So you've rewritten the whole I Ching then?
I haven't rewritten the whole I Ching. That's a from the very beginning, once I heard this assignment, this cosmic assignment,
Yeah,
I would say, well, this will be a several lifetimes work.
at least.
Yeah, at least. I was not in a hurry to like claim that I so I wrote a resonance code which laid out the fundamental architecture of I Ching. Is the code that I described to you, the 4 basic energetic signature, and that can be permutated in 3 positions. In fact, my dream showed me these 3 positions. So in this dream, there's the whale, there's me standing on the shore, and there's the nun that's standing on the cliff. So basically, that's our biological nature, the part of ourselves that's entrained with the biological process, and our social identity, which is the one standing on the shore, and the soul, the soul, the part of our soul that remember our mission, our purpose on earth. So these 3 positions, the 4 energetic mode permutating, that gave rise to 64. So I want to get to this simple architecture, so allow people to have their own exploration of the 64 without too much textual or definitional, without too heavy-handed definition. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Because the book I use is that classic Wilhelm Jung book, which I think is sort of considered the kind of the classic, at least Western tome on the subject. And it's quite explicit. The commentary is pretty, and of course it's based on the ancient Chinese, and then translated. Wilhelm translated it, and Carl Jung wrote the foreword, and really talked about the synchronicity. Binds the micro and the macro together as one. And how the oracles bridge that micro macro duality within a single unity. And so what you've done is sort of really lightened it up.
Totally. And this is actually one I think contrast with the East and West, the East. So we so you talk about the in the Western tradition, there is a kind of I'd say the words is the words come from God. There's a fixation on the words. In the
beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Where the Chinese
very
mind,
Western. It's very Western.
With the Chinese mind, were more fluid than that. It's much more fluid. So in fact, that's what keeps I Ching alive, is the fluidness. Is the diversity, is
the way that can be spoken is not the true way.
Yes, exactly. Therefore, generate very diverse linguistic contextual. That's why if you study Chinese medicine, there's this practice, that practice. There's like thousands different qigong practice, and many dozens of school of like a medical lineage. They can all coexist because there's a very lean, very simple central architecture at the core, that it does not prescribe, does not define things, but it just sets things up, kind of like an architect. You build a frame, and you can renovate the interior, like paint all kinds of things in the interior room. So that's kind of the work that I want resonance code to serve, to give people the flexibility to make their own meanings. That's why I just now, when I was openly talk about my own relational problem, intimate problem I had I not have the tool of make meaning out of it myself, I can still feel the burden of the shame and the guilt. As a woman living through the patriarch, there's a felt sense of, boy, that was just like shameful, and you shouldn't talk about it to public, especially not respectable and credible women, right? But this is exactly what I Ching like empowered me to do. This is my own experience, and I need to own it and make meaning out of it myself, and see how even that can be a grace.
Yeah, and oftentimes, as you're saying, it's out of the trauma of here you were married and having a love relationship with a guy who's also married. I mean, that is a classic taboo.
Yes.
And so the shame and the guilt, but also the willingness to transgress the limits of propriety because of the love is stronger than the restrictions, and everything gets bound up.
Yes.
And it all is happening in a cauldron in your psyche.
Yes. Yes.
And then you throw the I Ching, and you keep getting the marrying maiden, and realize that it's talking to you from the male point of view,
right,
and you need it to talk to you from the female point of
yeah,
view.
right.
So let me ask you then, so what, as you've reworked the I Ching in such an elegant manner, what aspects of the feminine have surfaced that weren't there before, and how would you describe the new wholeness of the I Ching now that you've surfaced the sort of the yin aspects in a yang text?
Right. So
this is fascinating. It's fascinating.
This is actually also, I'm indebted to my partner, my husband, my love of life, Joe. His work is that we both actually devoted ourselves to experiment how use feeling or intuition or felt sense as the navigational compass. So you ask me, how did I invented the resonance code, right? I would say just one line. I followed I basically turned into an animal. Like I tuned my senses, my eyes, my smell, my hearing to follow the subtle sign. And, I can tell you for all 10 years, I never take any people's advice on how I run my business. I defied all the conventional wisdom of how to run my business, and I'm still, viable. So that's a testimony that I'm still standing, right? So, because I just really want to stick with, what if I completely surrender to how I feel? And when I say how I feel, it doesn't mean that's superficial of like, oh, feeling well, feeling pleasant, but actually strip away all these, our modern ways of understanding what pleasure, pain, guilt, shame is, to actually use my body to feel, to really ground myself in the felt sense, without the layering of the intellectualization. In fact, I have a practice whenever I'm at a crossroad being presented, say, like 4 or 5 different choices, and I don't know where to go, I would put these choices into little vials, little like bottles, like write them on a bottle, and I will put it in a way that I don't know what they are, and I put it in the little bottle, and I put it in this space here in my office, and I just use my hand or use my eyes to feel the energy, and let that choices to tell me what is the most life-giving way. So that's how I got. Yeah.
Right. By the way, there's Josh Middledorf is saying that he's just written a sonnet poem for each of the 64 hexagrams, and it's soon to be published with illustrations.
Wow.
By Meryl Ann Butler. And I would imagine, Josh, you have deeply imbibed in the feminine to write poetry for each of these hexagrams. It'd be wonderful to have you and Spring interact to see how the resonance code in your sonnets align and mutually
Wow.
illumine
Yeah, I would love.
uh,
I don't have
one another.
bandwidth to read all the chat. I know lots going on, so I
Yeah,
will hopefully get it afterwards and and yeah.
Josh, write me an email. Let's get you on Humanity Rising. The I Ching is a bottomless well of wisdom that is worth contemplating over and over. So, Spring, tell us a little bit more about the resonance code. I know it's a book; it's published. Tell us how we can get a hold of it. Is it on your website, or
Yeah.
how do we familiarize ourselves with the resonance code?
The resonance code was published in 2019, which is 4 years ago. As anybody who wrote the book, you would say, it's outdated already. So, but you can get resonance code on Amazon, on my website. You can download the thing on the website electronically. You can get a print on Amazon. There's the color and the black and white version. And I also want to say that as soon as here's you would like the resonance, Jim. As soon as I published the resonance code, I was being discovered by Chinese. I think I told you the story that this one person who come from China and said, "Wow, this is great. I wonder if you can come back to China to work." His name is I Ching.
You can't make this stuff up, folks.
So I guess that's a cosmic like pat on my shoulder.
I think that's a sign. I think that's a sign.
Yeah. And it's almost like a cosmic joke because in Chinese the book is called I Ching. That's how we say I Ching. And in English, what do you call you say I Ching, you change the anglicized meaning, sound is changed a little bit. So this person's name in Chinese is actually means integrity and love, which is a beautiful name, which is actually the essence of I Ching itself. But a Chinese person would never associate his name with I Ching. But when we spoke in English, it become connected. Yeah. So I want to say that you asked the book of resonance code. So it's available, but it's 4 years ago. The best way to know about resonance code is actually to sign up at our Resonance Pass website. And because we offer live course and live seminar and the live work, because this work is ongoing developing. We have, in the last 3 years, I worked for Chinese people. The work has went bound and leaps beyond what's been published. So yeah, and part of the work I brought in the recent master degree was ubiquity, regenerative health. And I'm also in the process of building a master degree just based on resonance code work itself. So it's the best way is to sign up our website and keep
and can you put your website in the chat?
Sure.
And
yeah.
This is so fascinating, everyone. I mean, to take such an ancient classic text and bring up the feminine qualities and make it more whole and make it more resonant is an extraordinary achievement. So Spring, I really want to acknowledge that and your willingness to enter into some of these deep contradictions that have emerged as traumas and find that level of light.
Thank you.
It's really quite extraordinary. Tell us a little bit before we bring this to a close about your work in China. So this is really taking off in China.
Yeah. Oh, my work in China. Oh my God. Home return. It's so very emotional when I think about it. It's feel like a return home. It's like almost like I'm shepherding a lost spirit back to
back in.
Back in. And I was met with, it's interestingly 90% of the, I'd say more than 90% of people who were drawn to resonance code and stayed were women. And the women who tend not to have, a lot of women who are teachers, who are homemakers, stay-home parent, stay-home mom, and in China, I think the awakening of feminine consciousness is just at the beginning, and the resonance code is tapping into that, just newly awakened feminine consciousness. And there's lots of story to tell of my, it's an adventure, 3 years, and that's a 3 years of adventure in parallel with the pandemic, COVID pandemic. So that's a whole another story of the adventure in China. But I was just mostly deeply touched with the bonding that happened between me and the students, the women waking up together and supporting each other.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And just so everyone knows, Spring and I are in deep conversation about how we can develop her work in China into master's and eventually PhD degrees at Ubiquity in the resonance code, in this work of the revitalization of this very ancient text, which is one of the pillars of human civilization, actually, because those are the foundations, like Torah, like Kabbalah, like the Quran, like the Bhagavad Gita. These are foundational texts upon which the whole of civilization rests. And so the ongoing refinement, and in our time, the feminization of these ancient texts is really the work of the ages. It's really the work of generational maturation as these classic texts are brought into modernity in what would be called a hermeneutic of engagement. You take that, you go back to the ancient, you reinterpret it so it's increasingly relevant to what's new. And Spring, you have done that in a really sensitive and beautiful way. So I just really want to acknowledge you.
Thank
and
you.
The extraordinary achievement that you've wrought.
Thank you. I didn't do this alone. I have many people, my partner and co-author, Joseph Friedman, my editor, Alan. There's so many, like, along the way, I just can't imagine how graceful and generous universe is. And you now I'm in relationship, in partner with Ubiquity, and a new partner, a new alliance is forming.
That's a great line with which to close, everyone. We have no idea about how generous the universe is. All we have to do is fall to our knees and open ourselves to the abundance that's in every cell of our body and in the totality of everything that is. And the way that can be spoken, the way that we think it is not the true way. That's what's true. That's what's true. And that's the I Ching. That's the I Ching. So Dr. Cheng, thank you so much for being with us today. I feel graced. I feel blessed.
I feel lots of love.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that will bring us to a close for today, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat. Spring, I hope you can join where we can dive more deeply in. And we're going to have Spring back down the road for a deeper dive. And maybe next time we'll take Shannon's suggestion of actually throwing the coins on the session. Maybe with someone who has a deep question they would like to answer and don't mind it doing it in an audience of over 130 countries. But that'll be for next time for us to contemplate. And so thank you so much, Spring. And thank you, everyone. And then tomorrow we're going to go from ancient China to modern day Iran and talk to some people who are deeply immersed in that political and social situation of women, life, and freedom from the vantage point of nonviolent action, and how nonviolent action can stop even the most coercive regimes in Iran. But Spring, blessings.
Thank you so much, Jim. Such a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank
And
you.
thank you, all of you. All right.
Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.